see.
So Shaheen and I just met, and we have an unknown to me commonality, and that is what, Shaheen? Just elaborate a little bit on what you and I were talking about, because I think if nothing else, it built a solid rapport with which to continue the rest of this conversation.
Yeah, man. Well, we're both martial artists and both students of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and the striking arts. And I think that's always a connector, because if you meet another dude that's like doing that same kind of thing, you always have there's a mutual amount of respect, because you know that that person has been to battle more or less, right?
Yeah, and Shaheen was talking. He's on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast, and he was talking about where he would train with some of the Gracies out that way, and I had the opportunity to train with the Gracie, mainly Henzo on the East Coast, and then Ricardo Almeida, and we were just talking me about um, just I
Your
completely
UFC career,
yeah
and
about the
yeah.
UFC career and Henzo. I couldn't think of Henzo's name, and just what solid people they are, and he is. And John Donaher, and I don't often talk about those things anymore, really. I speak, I write books, I have a podcast where I interview all kinds of walks of life. So it is cool to, reconnect with that world that I was once a part of that really I'm pretty disconnected from.
Yeah, well, it's becomes a part of you. It's funny that you mentioned that. We can go into more kind of my story as it revolves around business and whatnot. But when we came here from Iran in the 1970s, and it was the worst time to be an Iranian kid, because I remember going to school here and just getting my ass kicked every day because people were super racist, and it was like towel head, camel jockey, all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, 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 I'm just moving here. And somewhere along the way, I decided to pick up a book. So I picked up this book, and I made my folks get it for me, called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. And I was so excited that I watched all his movies. Here's this like skinny Chinese guy who's just taking no shit from anybody. Right? And everybody knows, you watch those movies. He was just fucking the badass that we all wanted to be. And he was
Mm-hmm.
fighting for what was right, and he stood up for himself. And I was like, I want to be like that fucking dude. So I started off, taking martial arts, and I started off in karate, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to do this. And I was like, wait a second, they're punching like this and blocking like this. And I tried that in the playground, got the shit kicked out of me again. And I was like, all right, this is not working. And I noticed in his book that, I learned later that Bruce Lee had died, I think in 73. So I was devastated by that, because I was devoted to becoming his like biggest disciple. Didn't happen. But the guy who put together his book, post his postmortem, was this guy Dan Inosanto, and he had an academy here in Marina del Rey. So I was like, dude, I'm gonna go train there. And they were like, well, at the time Dan didn't have a kids class. Now he's got the best kids class in the country. And I said, hey, let me just train with you guys. And I was like a kid. I was like, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. And they let me come in there and train with them. And I trained, Savat, Thai kickboxing with Master Chai, who like brought Thai kickboxing to the
Mm-hmm.
US, and all the different, Filipino martial arts. And it was spectacular. But to your point, a lot of these like old school guys like Dan Inosanto, they're just amazing people. Like they've
Mm-hmm.
lived their lives through the lens of martial arts, and they approach the world with respect and humility, which is, probably the two qualities that I think you and I both share, and that we see most in others, where we're like, wow, yeah, that's awesome.
I agree 100%. So as part of my podcast, I have a weekly kids episode, and the premise of it is a kid's resource. Most of the time, a kid's book, and it could be chapter books, picture books, etc. And every once in a while, I'll just put out references, tools for parents, guardians, teachers, educators to use to kind of teach life lessons to young people. And today, I'll be releasing an episode later today as we're recording this, and I highlighted Highlights Magazine, Ranger Rick, but then also this movie that I just saw with my kids called Raya and the Last Dragon. And I generally write some themes to the books or movies I talk about, and respect and honor. You mentioned respect and humility, but respect and honor were two of the themes that I wrote down, and I find myself to kind of tie it back to the martial arts and your initiation of Bruce Lee and the martial arts training. whether it was a necessity, like because you moved here and you dealt with that, but I'm captivated. I'm captivated by both the virtues, the principles of respect and honor. But then I'm also, as a human, maybe as a guy, just infatuated with that like kick ass mentality. Like it's a real, like for me as a fighter, it gives you a competency and a confidence to just feel pretty good in general. Just your state of being, your stasis is pretty calm, and that the physical aspect of that with the mental or the mindset aspect of continuous learning and growth, I think is indispensable. And those are two of the major, more so the learning than the physicality of it, but that I try to pass on to kids, through those weekly shows, but also speaking and interacting with students. When you moved here from Iran, and you said you were 14.
No, when I moved here from Iran, I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, 4 or 5. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned the interactions, the bullying, the name calling. Prior to segueing into what you do for a living and the businesses that you've built over the years, take me back to that, because I talk a lot about that with kids. I
Sure.
have 2 little kids, but speaking in schools, just talk a little bit about your memories, right? As a grown man, because I connect to the things that happened to me. And I think the reason I do what I do is because of what happened to me in middle school. But
Yeah.
just take me back to that time for you and how you got through it, what you
Yeah,
learned from it.
totally. Totally. And and we can talk about my upcoming book that's going to be out in August. I talk about this a lot in my book. But, look, in Iran, it was a different story. I was the country that I was from. I spoke the language. I was king of the heat. No problem, right? We'd go out on the street. If there was an issue, you handle it, right? Somebody pushes you, you push them back, you're good to go. And we came here, and it's funny because I have a 7-year-old boy myself, and it's a totally different world now, as I'm sure as far as that kind of stuff goes. Because when I came in the 80s, I mean, I would just get the shit kicked out of me, and I'd tell the teacher, she'd be like, "What'd you do?" I'd be like, "That guy just, he just like, clobbered me with a haymaker from the back." It's like, well, you think about what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a much tougher time, I think, as a kid to grow up, because I think they weren't really taking all that bullying and stuff seriously. But at a certain point, you begin to realize that it does build grit and fortitude, and that you've got to just fucking stand up for yourself. Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of guys around right now from our age group. I'm probably a little bit older than you, but who are just crushed in life because they didn't stand up to that bully.
Yeah.
And I tell my kid, right? My kid trains Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He trains over at the academy, and they tell him too, like, we don't instigate any kind of violence. But if somebody hits him or threatens him or tries to injure his body, like, fucking dude, do what you got to do. You have to defend yourself. And I don't think I'm of the mind where we should be raising especially boys, and this might be a controversial thought, but that are less than confident and capable of standing up for themselves and taking care of themselves. I think that crushes, I think later on in life, that crushes their self-identity and their confidence.
I agree 100%. And confident and capable, I think, are 2 really good words to use in that sense. And I'm the same way. And I'm always drawn back to the speak softly and carry a big stick idea. It's that you don't, just like you mentioned, what you went through as a kid, on the other side of it, it builds grit and resilience and toughness, and something you would never want that for anyone, but you, having gone through it on the other side of it, realizes the value in it. It very much the same way. And then the confidence and competence that comes from just physical capability. And I also feel that way with your mind, with your brain, with learning, with reading books, because you're able to enter a conversation when you read books consistently, when you learn this interview with you. I mean, I'm going to pick your brain about specifics about your business, how I can apply it to my business. I think just that side of it, the mental training, is equally compatible and beneficial as a physical training to create a strong, well-rounded person. I think they work hand in hand.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, once I got proficient at fighting and at martial arts, as a kid, I'm still a student, still learning. But, as a kid, once I got proficient, I got in a lot less fights. And I think it's one of those things where it definitely gives you, I heard Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, who's got a podcast and a great book. And he talks about how jujitsu is a superpower. And it really is, not so much so because you have this like tool that you can use as a superpower, but much more so because it gives you this inner fortitude, this knowledge. It almost like implants this mojo. Like dudes that know how to fight, like you just see them. You might not be a fighter, you might not know anything, but you just look over and you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna fuck with that dude. Right. You don't even have to be like, I mean, in our world, we look, we see like dudes with the, cauliflower ear or whatever. I can't see your ears, but you probably got them. Right. You look at the ears and you're like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm not fucking with that guy. Like when I'm in the studio and I see a dude come in and his ears are fucked up, I don't care what belt he is. I'm just like, not fucking with that guy. We're going easy. But
It's funny too. I enjoy talking about this stuff because I never do, and it is an acquired taste. And some people might be rolling their eyes right now, but it really is what I kind of thrive on as a human. I practiced it, I lived it, and now at this point I kind of value and respect it. So I look at it a little differently. But it's funny too. Walking into the room, it's easy for me to kind of sniff out legit and not legit, and you can't fake it. You can't, it would be like being inauthentic on a stage or on a microphone. It's just like you can see right through it. As a former fighter, like someone who's trained and capable yourself as well, like you can tell legitimacy versus non-legitimacy.
absolutely. Yeah. And, similarly, so to your point, look, I've, my first business, we created over $1 billion in revenue. And now I've got a multi-million-dollar Amazon company where we teach and train people how to make money on Amazon. And we can get into that later. But the fact is that being a black belt in business is kind of the same thing. Once you get proficient, you build that foundation and those skill sets. When I go into a meeting, in general, people don't fuck with me usually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for a number of reasons, but it's that same kind of thing where you pick up something that other people pick up just intuitively. They go, hey, I can sense that this guy is not the guy, you want to fuck with. So it's almost like a business cauliflower ear that people might pick up on,
100%. And that comes through evolution. And I do want to get in, now, I guess, to your business building. There's a lot of alignment, correlation to things we're talking about, physically fighting to building a business. And I've wrestled, fought, and built a business, and they're all terribly difficult, right? And fighting and wrestling might, I think, be easier only because in business there's not an opponent. There's not a person I'll choke or punch or kick or take down or slam or try to defeat. It's kind of like this opponent that's out there that has 1,000 different heads, and you're trying to contain it, and it's just so difficult and it's so overwhelming. So all of these things we're talking about from your youth, from training martial arts, had to lend itself to the stress, anxiety, frustration, all the other negative stuff, tough stuff that comes with building a business. So can you just elaborate on the similarities of those two things?
Yeah. And I think, after this weekend, I can tell you briefly kind of my story so you guys can get a little bit of background, but let me speak to that, because that's a really good point for us to pick up on. So here's the thing. My wife asked me a while ago, like, why do you go? Like, I come back from the studio, like there's blood all over my gi. Like, my arm is like, I'm icing every part. I'm putting that freeze stuff on. Like I've got every rehab thing here, like known to man. I got cryo, I've got the sun, like I'm doing it. She's like, why do you do this? And I thought, there's a moment of purity that comes in combat. And I mean, actual physical combat with another person, with another practitioner, where in that moment, the world falls away. And I am sure as a UFC pro, you've experienced this where, the kids crying, the house, the mortgage payments, the car, whatever you have going on disappears, and you are in that zone. You are in that flow. And in that moment, it's pure because you can't fucking bullshit. It's just you and that guy. It doesn't matter what belt you have around your waist. It doesn't matter what your credentials are. It doesn't matter how many knockouts you've had before. Nothing matters. All that matters in that moment is your performance then and there. Tyson Fury, one of the great interviews, I have it up on my Instagram, where he's talking to somebody and saying, the difference between me and Deontay Wilder. And he's like, that guy's a businessman. For me, he's like, all I care about is knocking motherfuckers out. I don't care about any of that other stuff. And I watched that interview and I thought, this is a guy that's self-realized. That's why he's the champ, because he understands that in that moment, that's where truth is found. And you can't bullshit. You can't get on the mat with another dude and pretend like you're better. You know that guy's gonna fucking crush you, right? So it's pure. Now let's take this one step further. In business, similarly, you just have one metric, man. Are you making a profit or are you not? It's absolute purity. I traded highly leveraged commodities for years, gold, oil, all that stuff. Hundreds of millions of dollars of commodities were traded through me and my companies. And trading is the ultimate vision of this, because there is nothing. You are producing nothing. You are bringing nothing into the world. All that matters at the end of the day is when you look at your balance sheet and you made $1 more than you spent. That you made a profit. That's all that matters. And business is the same way. When you become a black belt in business, you realize like none of that other shit matters. People talking shit, competition, competitors, marketplace, all the like none of that stuff fucking matters. All that matters is that you are this much ahead than where you were yesterday, and you make more than you spend. That's it. Making a profit.
And to add some real life of my business kind of journey to what you're just saying, it's been a long process, and I started 2014, end of 14, basically 15, got my feet wet like 15, 16 business wise. So I would say like 3 to 5 years into my business. And so I'm an evolution in current, progress and evolving. But what you said there to put some, black and white to that for the listeners. So it's easy to make noise. It's easy to create fluff. It's easy to just act like everything's going well. And then behind the scenes, we as the viewers, consumers, we don't know like what's the bottom line look like. So for me, I can get lost to go to what you said. I can get lost in the how many likes am I getting on my social media posts, et cetera, or how many this, how many downloads, how many that. But if I'm not selling, if there's not a transaction, if there's not an execution of a sale of my product, because it is a business, then what am I doing? And I'm realizing now during COVID and coming out of COVID, I've got to put as many touches on the prospect as possible if I want this to be a really good business, not just sustainable, but ongoing and growing. Like I've got to put the right touches with my philosophy, the least amount of stress and energy on me. How do I automate that? How do I systemize it? How do I put it in front of the right person? Because I might get 200 likes on a post, but guess what? No one bought, like it feels good, but like nothing happened. And so the very black and white, that's the reason I love following Nature is Metal, which I send my on Instagram. If you don't watch that, it's a nature account that shows some really gruesome stuff. And it's not like I'm a sadist and I like seeing it, but to me, that's a reminder every day of truth, of the truth, actuality, and the black and whiteness of, am I moving forward or am I not moving forward? And I like to get in front of that stuff rather than dance around it and create fluff, but rather being honest with that bottom line.
Yeah. To your point, what we were talking about earlier with the kids and bullying in school, dude, you got to make a choice. You can either become a predator or become prey. You got to make a choice. There is no middle ground. You look in nature, watch those videos. Is there somebody who's like, dude, I'm fucking Switzerland, I'm neutral? No. Every single animal, organism, situation in the natural world revolves around this predator-prey relationship. And if you don't choose, it will be chosen for you. It's harsh to say, people don't like to believe it, but the fact is that, you got to learn that. You got to pick.
On my show this week, on the podcast this week, I'm covering Danny Trejo's book. It's called Trejo, My Life of Crime, Redemption in Hollywood. And in the book specifically, he says, in prison, you're either predator or prey. And it, you know, we're not in prison. We're not talking about prison, but we are talking about life. And that idea translates across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. I met him a while back. He makes good tacos, man. He's got those amazing taco
Trejo's
restaurants.
Tacos.
Yeah.
It's quite a book. I recommend it to everyone. It's an awesome book. So let's get into the business side of things. Sure. You started your first business when you were young, and you started a lot of businesses. You've made a lot of money, and help product development, help every aspect of business. Amazon Mastery course. I'm someone who has 2 books on Amazon that wonders, how does anyone sell any books on Amazon? Because I am selling no books on Amazon. So it's with Ernst that we dive into this stuff. But talk a little bit about your early business, your start, evolution, kind of, you know, like a version of the evolution of it. And then I want to get into some of the specifics, some of the lessons that you as a successful entrepreneur have learned and can pass on to me and anyone else that's interested in business.
Yeah, totally. I could probably kill those 2 birds with one stone. So I started off, of course, coming in from Iran, like we were saying, getting the shit kicked out of me in school. And by the time I was 13, even though I could handle myself, I was like, oh man, I gotta find an exit plan. And then I hit 15 and I was like, you know what? I'm fucking out. Done. Dropped out of high school. I think it was like 9th grade, out, and started sleeping in abandoned buildings, on the beach, wherever I could, till I figured out what my plan was. Now I was reading all these great books, Augmentino, Napoleon Hill. You know, back in those days, I was really impressed with the fact that you can buy a book and learn from somebody who spent 30 years living a life. So I would read a lot, but I didn't have any money. I didn't have any friends. And I found a mentor, and I started getting involved in the rave scene, the electronic music scene, the EDM scene at the time. So what happened was that basically I realized that these clubs started late. So I could go there and there usually be like a behind the speakers, which was, you know, there'd be like a nice hum. I could sleep for like 3 or 4 hours and then wake up and, you know, go about my day. Plus I'd meet some people. The music was fun. It was a cool environment. I never did any drugs in those days. And I was like, you know what, this is kind of cool for me. Let me check this out. So I started hanging out at these raves and I started looking around me going, wow, these happen every week, more than several times a week. Who's making money? It's got to be the promoters. Nope. The promoters always would bail. Nobody would get paid. They'd be broke. It would be a whole thing. I thought, well, I got it. It's the musicians. Musicians make money, right? Musicians, you see them on TV. Musicians make money. Nope. Those guys were always broke. The DJs were always out with their hands outstretched, being like, when is the promoter going to pay me? I'm like, sorry, buddy, never. They never got paid. So I was like, well, it's got to be the real estate, right? The people, nope, those buildings were mostly break-ins. Somebody would find a key to a warehouse, or they'd, you know, hop in through the back door and open the warehouse and the parties would be there. So I thought to myself, someone's making money. And I would see these guys hanging around the club. They'd give the DJs a little bit of money and, you know, they'd just make sure things would run just at minimal level, but they'd be smiling. They'd have a nice car, nice clothes. Guess who these guys were?
I'm trying to think of who's involved in any of this. And
it was the drug dealers. So I thought
it's such a terrible truth. So as you're talking, I'm thinking, you know, when you really dive into businesses or systems or whatever, it's like music is a great example. You'll find out that musicians get screwed oftentimes, or actors. You know, I'm actually watching, Val Kilmer has a new documentary out on Prime. And this was, and I'm not saying he got ripped off because it didn't allude to that, but, you know, this was after Top Gun, and he just got in situations where he did not have a lot of money. And I'm thinking, like, how does this happen? He had his reasons, obviously. But back to what you're saying, it's like, come on, man. It's such a terrible reality that was the truth.
It was the truth. And these guys were making money. And at the time, the supply of ecstasy, which was the big drug, Molly, MDMA, whatever you call it, had gone down because people didn't know how to make it here in this country. It was coming from Europe and the supply chain dried out. And so I thought, man, if there was a way where I could make a natural legal version of this. And why legal? Because I realized that as being an incredibly neurotic human being, that I would be really bad at crime. I saw all these people who did crime, and most of them did a really shitty job. I knew I would be really bad at crime. So I thought, right away, that crime would not be a good move for me. So I started looking for this hack. I thought, hey, maybe I can make a legal thing. And so eventually I figured it out. And I went up to the club and I found the same dude. And I said, hey, buddy, you want to sell this stuff? And he said, fuck off, kid. And I said, look, okay, I got you. But here's the thing. A, you're going to go to jail eventually. B, even if you don't go to jail, you don't have supply. And right now you've got customers that are eager and want to use product, but you got nothing to sell them. So what do you have to lose? So, all right, let me give it a shot. Hour later, dude came back and he told me, like, this was the most incredible thing ever. People in the club were dancing. Everybody was pointing at me. And he just looks at me and he goes, how do I get more? And that was it. It was on. It went from one guy to 10 guys to 100 guys and to 1,000 guys, till one day I woke up and I walked into my office in Venice Beach. Hang on one sec. So I walked into my office in Venice Beach, and I got the news that we had broken $1 billion in revenue. I had 200 employees. I was employing all of Venice. It was like a crazy thing. And I got this news. Hey man, you just made $1 billion in revenue. CNN wants to interview you. Sam Donaldson wanted me to have me on Nightline, which I did. Montel Williams wanted me on a show. Everybody wanted me. And I remember having this moment of incredible anxiety and panic, thinking, fuck, I don't know how much $1 billion is. Like, I didn't know what that number meant. It was 1,000 million, 100 million, 15, like, I didn't know. And this was pre-internet, pre-Facebook, pre-cell phones. And I was just having them. And then people calmed me down and they were like, bro, you're okay. No one's going to ask you that. You'll figure it out by the time. They just want this long-haired kid that's selling these pills. And from there on out, it was a wild journey. We were the largest supplement company in the world at the time, creating these products that people were just fanatic about and had gone crazy over. And we were selling them everywhere. And to this day, not a single person ever got injured from them. We've created so many millionaires over the years from that product. And, it was a really good time. And I write about it. There were some insane times. And, my book's coming out in August. It's called Billion: How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. And for any of your viewers or listeners, if they're interested, I've got the first chapter up on my podcast, Billion. So if you guys want to check it out, you get the first chapter for free on there.
Yeah, what a cool story. And I have a few things to unpack from that. It's funny, this kind of is off the subject, but it's a relevant experience. I come from very middle class central Pennsylvania. I guess there's some millionaires, but not many. Houses don't cost $1 million. The majority, it's a lot different than North Jersey, California, et cetera. And I remember the first time I was talking to a millionaire friend of mine, a legitimate millionaire friend of mine. And he exposed me to a world that I didn't even know existed before. And I remember hearing / figuring out his monthly income and paychecks. And it was like, you say you didn't know what a billion was. Like, I didn't realize that when you're a millionaire, multimillionaire, and you actually break it down into like paychecks or income, it's a lot of freaking money. Like, it's a lot of money. And I remember the first mental, like, oh my gosh, you hear millionaire, but you don't understand $50,000 every 2 weeks or, whatever it is. So that's a funny thing that is memorable for both yourself figuring out what a billion is, and for me realizing what a millionaire actually looks like.
Yeah. In my case, I was so busy, on this wild ride that I wasn't even keeping track of like the money that I was making. And it's funny that you say that, because I would like, people would invite me to lunches and dinners or whatever. And I'd like hang out with a dude who'd gone to school for 8 years and became a lawyer. And he's like driving a Porsche. And I'd be like, dude, like, how much money are you making? And he'd be like, I'm making like in those days, like 150,000, which would be like 300,000. I'd be like, I made that like yesterday. Like, you went to school and like, there was no calculation. I remember, I write in the book the story of, I had this dog, and my dog was like my best friend because I couldn't trust anybody. I had so much money that like everybody wanted something. So, and I was young and everybody was taking advantage. So the dog was kind of like my comfort animal. And I had the dog up in my office, and there was like papers everywhere, and I was like going through, and there's checks for thousands of dollars, and I would just grab them and throw them in a pile or whatever. And the dog knocked down this pile of like papers with checks and stuff. And I reached down, and there was a check for $1 million. And I remember looking at it and just putting it back on the pile and then going, what the fuck did I do? That was just $1 million. That's how little I actually cared, like that it mattered. And, it's a really good lesson about life, about, not leaning into things, which, one of my teachers used to always teach us that, anytime you go after something with desperation, without the thought of, I want to bring something excellent into the world, but rather I want to just chase money, or I want to get that hot girl, or I want to, do that thing. Anytime you lose track of bringing value and bringing excellence into the world, the thing that you want most is pushed furthest away from you. And when I learned that, it became easy. Making money became easy. And that whole lesson of not leaning into things. If it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, that's okay too. I'm busy doing this thing that brings me purpose in life. And that's really how you win. That's really the most important thing.
And I think what you said there, to add a little bit to it, I think what you said there is, it can be like an actual tactical and strategical thing that you do. Like, what am I trying to do? Create value or make money? Like, that can actually dictate your actions that you take. But I also think that that's a psychological decision that you make in your mind, almost like one of those karma or energy things that, you could be doing the same thing, but if your mindset, your intention, your focus is money versus value, I think that can help dictate, it's getting a little bit out there, but I do think that does play a role in dictating your success one way or another.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack a little bit, because you mentioned the rave scene, the drug dealer coming up with a legal version of ecstasy, my words. But there's a lot that goes on between having that idea, who's making money, drug dealers, how can I create that, to walking up to that guy with a finished product. So did you know, I just talked to, I don't know when it will be published, but I talked to a guy who has Nick Bear Performance Nutrition, and he was talking about developing the product line as well, and sending away, measuring, etc. Did you have a background on that? Like the I don't even know what the word is, substances, chemicals, whatever, that pill is comprised of?
No, I just made shit up as I went along. And, one of my mentors at that time went a long way to teach me. And, now I teach my students, on Amazon and how to make money doing that, using these same elements of influence. My mentor taught me, he said, hey, if you can influence somebody to do what you want, you don't really need money. Money is the easiest way to influence somebody, but there's so many other ways. Like you and I were talking about, you can do it by building a rapport. You can do it by bringing value. And there's lots of different ways you can bring value. So I pulled out the yellow pages back in those days. We used to have these books that were printed with all the phone numbers of everybody on the planet on there. And I reached into the yellow pages and I started calling people. I called herbalists, I called manufacturers. And sure, most people told me to go fuck off, or they wanted some crazy amount of money. But there were some people who were willing to entertain, if I could manage to take the bus out there, they were willing to entertain a meeting with me. And I found enough people to make my dream a reality, but also because I didn't know I could fail. it was not in the realm of possibilities. And back to, our examples of fighting, like when I look at Stylebender, for example, he's awesome. You ever watch his fights?
Oh yeah.
He's amazing. And there's this clip of him where he's like, before he goes into the ring, every single time he tells himself that he is ready to die. He's ready to die. He's like, let's fucking go. There's nothing left. Like, he's either going to win or he's going to die. And you believe that when you see that guy. And I think to myself, it was the same for me in business. I had nothing to lose. I came from absolutely nothing, zero, less than nothing. I was in debt. And when I went into business, it wasn't a question for me that I was going to succeed. It was just how fast. And sure, I got knocked down a lot along the way, a lot. There were a lot of things that happened. But at the end of the day, I didn't let those things keep me down. I just kept getting back up.
And what's the name of the pill?
So the pill was called herbal ecstasy, and it was an alternative to ecstasy back in those days.
What a crazy thought. Crazy.
Yeah. Let's
Crazy
check it out
story.
for you guys who are on the radio. That was me when I was in my teens. So
I've been trying to measure that picture versus what I'm seeing now on
yeah,
the
right.
screen, and it's very different.
I
It's
had a
very
little more
different.
hair then.
And
Back
so
in those
then,
days.
did herbal ecstasy like open up? You had been in business prior to that, so but did that open up doors and pathways and opportunities that you hadn't had before?
Yeah, it's like anything in life. Once you're successful, success finds success. Successful people want to be around you. I had all kinds of, I was dating supermodels, and I was being flown out on private planes and yachts and hanging out with celebrities, and everybody wanted to have me at the party because they wanted that long haired, teen kid that's making the pill that everybody's raving about. And I was doing TV shows and flying out, meeting all kinds of millionaires and billionaires. And, once you're in that circle, that's who they feel comfortable with. Successful people feel comfortable around other successful people, famous people. If you look around at famous people, who are their friends? Other famous
Yeah.
people, because they feel comfortable around them.
Yeah, people they can relate to. And so I want to get into Amazon because
Yeah.
I'm interested in Amazon because my partner and I, Dread, we I have 2 books up on Amazon. He actually just in 2020 self-published 20 books, a
Wow.
variety of different styles of books. But we're I hate to say trying to figure out Amazon because that's such a novice. That's like someone coming in day one and saying, "I want to fight UFC. How do I do it?" I'm well aware of the fact that quote figuring out Amazon is a job, right? That's like a huge part of what you do is teach people that. But prior to jumping into that, what do you think of that guy, right? Shaahin from back then. What do you think of that guy? Who you were, your experiences, the lessons learned, not necessarily positive or negative, but when I look back at myself early in fighting, and then when I look back, you mentioned Adesanya Stylebender looking at himself and saying he's willing to die. I never thought that, but I never didn't think that. But when I have kids, no, I'm not willing to die. Absolutely not. Like I have
That's right.
kids, they're more important to me than this. So I just observe, right? When you can observe you back then from you who you are now, what comes to your mind? What do you think?
I think about how dangerous a lot of the thoughts and strategies I had were. And it's that risk, that ability to take that risk, that allowed me to have this astronomical success that I had in those days. Had I had kids and a mortgage and all these things to worry about, I probably wouldn't have taken those risks. And risk, to a great degree, is proportionate with the amount of reward you get on the other end. Of course, a guy walking into working at McDonald's who's just going in and getting a paycheck day in, day out has very little risk. There's the risk the company might go down, he won't get paid, but that's infinitesimal small. The guy who owns the business runs ultimate risk. So he sees ultimate upside. As a guy with a chip on his shoulder back in those days, I don't feel much that way now. I think I could have done better seeking counsel, having mentors around me in all areas, not just personal development and physical development and what you would call spiritual development, but also in business, having people who've done what I want to do. I probably would have saved hundreds of millions of dollars if I had known what I know now. And, after the ecstasy thing, the herbal ecstasy thing, I started another successful company. That company went public. It was the first vaporizer company. We built all the technology for digital vaporization, portable digital vaporization. And that became a hugely successful company. We built all the forerunners of what you see now as vapes in shops. And and by the way, I'm not a proponent of smoking or vaping in any way whatsoever. But we built the technology as a harm reduction measure, and I'm happy that I did. And so after that, I decided, hey, you know what? Like, I'm getting in my 30s. We're gonna have a kid, and my mental functioning isn't as sharp as it was when I was in my 20s. I'm sure you feel the same way. So I thought, hey man, I'm gonna go and develop another pill. So I developed this brain pill, the stuff called Accelerol. It was spectacular. It did all that stuff that you thought. And it was funny. The idea came one day when Bradley Cooper, who was in the film Limitless, was at my house, and we were hanging out a long time ago. And then he went off to make that movie, and I didn't think much of it. And then I created this brain supplement. And then somebody told me, Bradley was at your house and you guys were talking about that. And I was like, holy shit. Okay. That happened. That's so funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
It was a great movie, by the way, but I think that's a longer story. So I made this pill and I was like, all right, it was expensive because we use really good ingredients. By the way, it's available now on Amazon. And we use really good ingredients for the stuff. And I thought, well, it's going to cost $100 a month. Who's going to buy that? Where am I going to sell it? I started thinking distribution first, which is one of the big lessons that, we teach, especially to our Amazon Mastery students, is don't create a product and go out there and try to find a place to sell it. Find what the market wants, what the market needs, what the market can't do without, and feed it what it needs. It's a much easier path.
So I have sorry to interject, but this is a big question I have, and I battle with this. So, that's a sound principle, right? And you'll hear it as a solid kind of time standing principle. How do you, because artists, right? Original singers, creators, they a lot of times they are them, right? They are themselves. Lady Gaga, there was no market for Gaga before Gaga was Gaga. Like, is that just like an anomaly, or how do you explain that?
How do you explain?
So what you just said is don't create it first and then look for we'll either say distribution or customer base. Rather look for that and then create what they need or what they want.
Gotcha.
With music, I'll say music because I know that example. Sure. They're not thinking that. They're thinking, I guess they could. Some are boy bands are put together to feed, but like someone like an original singer, like Lady Gaga or Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix, like to my knowledge, there wasn't a study saying the world could use this type of music right now. Rather, they created and the world was drawn to it.
Right. So the answer to that is, I'm going to give you two answers. Answer number one is that I'm not saying that it's not possible to innovate. I'm just saying it's the loneliest, longest, and hardest path to becoming successful. Yeah. Secondly, if you look at it, their music was innovative, but their distribution was not. The distribution was there. We were coming out, all those artists that you mentioned, like Hendrix, Joplin, Dylan, they came out of the 1950s, where in the 1950s, you had this very restrictive white picket fence, right? 2.5 kids, all American family, to the 1960s. And Americans hit the 1960s thinking, whoa, right? It was free sex. It was free love. You had the psychedelics revolution, you had Timothy Leary, you had all that stuff happening, and the market was ripe for music that would be very impactful. I'm very passionate about that particular genre of music, even though it has nothing to do with my business. So I know a little bit about that. So if you look at those folks, you could make the argument that they didn't invent a new genre of music. I mean, Dylan definitely didn't invent folk. Hendrix didn't invent, although one of arguably one of the most innovative artists of his time. He didn't invent, guitar riffs or experimental guitar, but the market needed that. Woodstock was growing, the beatnik movement, all that stuff was there. They just were feeding the market what it needed, is the argument that I would make. But you can innovate. Look, with the vaporizer, I was making those things in the early days, when we invented the vaporizer, it was the size of a ketchup bottle. And eventually it got down to the size of a cigarette. But when it was the size of a ketchup bottle, I was making them for $20 to $40, and we were selling them for $400 all day long. It took me close to 4 years and millions of dollars to build that technology, to innovate, just to watch hundreds of other people come in after I built the market and make many millions more than I ever made on that technology. Similarly, with herbal ecstasy, it wasn't really so much the innovation of the product. The product was great, but it was the distribution. The fact that I found these drug dealers that were out of drugs, and I fed them something that they could sell. And a lot of those guys became millionaires legally from selling my products. They created legitimate distributorships and were selling to shops all over the world. I mean, at a certain point, we were in Warehouse Records and Tower Records, and they were selling us in bookstores, and we were everywhere because of our distribution. So what I teach people on Amazon is, don't go out there and create and invent and innovate. Amazon is not the place for that. What you want to do is to find what the market needs and feed it. It's the shortest path. It's like, instead of going all the way around to get to where you want, you just go direct to it. That's the difference. So back in 2009, Bezos opens up the platform. We get a notice from somebody we know. And these were the days where you could email Jeff Bezos and he'd get right back to you, which is hilarious. I exchanged several emails with him. Nice guy. And I was like, oh, they're opening up this platform, and Bezos wants to invite you guys to sell whatever you want on this platform. So a third-party seller. Most people don't understand this. When you buy something from Amazon, you are not buying from Amazon necessarily. If it says for sale and shipped by Amazon, you're buying it from Amazon as a store. If it says anything else, you could be buying from one of 5 million different sellers. Anybody like yourself, like me, who's put the product up on there and is selling it and is just using their platform. And Amazon takes a commission and they pick, pack, and ship the product, and they sell it for you, which was one of the biggest innovations that Bezos made for sellers. Allegedly, Bezos went out there and poached one of the best fulfillment guys from Walmart, allegedly. Bezos, who people think, oh, he was this humble dude. He just sat in this like tiny office. He was using cinder blocks and a used door. That was his desk. No, he was a motherfucker. Bezos worked for D.H. Hutton, one of the biggest venture capital investment firms in the country. And he was highly sought after, and he had access to cheap capital, cheap money from Wall Street. And he took those dollars, said, guys, you're going to realize a loss. I don't know how long, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but I'm going to create the most valuable company on earth. And he did that. He did that because similarly, but what we're talking about, he had nothing to lose. He did not give a fuck. And he went out there and he did that. So right about the time when this is happening, I'm in the right place at the right time, synchronicity. And we launched this Accelerol product. I go to sleep. I don't think anything about it. I just put it up on there. Wake up the next morning to thousands of orders. And I thought to myself, dude, this is it. This is distribution. This is the thing that's happening. And I decided, I stopped everything that I was doing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to become a master of Amazon. I'm going to learn how to do this. And I'm going to teach other people how to do what I do. And that's...
Again, I said at the beginning of this, there's like specifics of what you're talking about that I don't know if the audience is going to appreciate this, but it's what I strive to know as a business owner. So a couple questions. When you say distribution, are you referring to the market, or are you referring to the warehouse, the trucks, the pick, pack, and ship side, or both of them?
I call that fulfillment. So that is not what I consider distribution. When we talk about distribution, I'm talking about distribution channels. So have you ever gone to the theater and seen a movie that was so bad you wanted to fucking go up there and punch somebody and be like, I want my 2 hours back?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had that experience?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And have you ever gone to the movie theater and seen like an amazing movie and thought to yourself, wow, man, I just paid $20 and I got to see this like $100 million blockbuster? Okay.
Yeah.
Those two things have one thing in common: distribution. Imagine how many amazing movies that are out there that have great acting and script and all that stuff, but they don't have the distribution.
A way of getting to the masses.
That's right. Art. There's so many amazing artists out there, but if they don't have the distribution, they will never be seen.
So where do you put the market, right? The customer, the desire, the want for your thing. Does that come after the distribution or before the distribution? And you're kind of prioritizing.
So what you do, what I teach people to do, is we use all kinds of tools. I'll give you a very real life example. So I teach people how to start Amazon businesses, normal people. I've got engineers, I've got attorneys, I've got people who start businesses for their wives. They're like, hey man, my wife's been home all during COVID. She's going nutty, like just taking care of the kids. She needs to be doing something. Can I start a business for her? And I say, yeah, let's start an Amazon business. And then, they start, making 5-10 grand a month extra money. And then they get it up to 50, 100, 150 grand, very normal numbers on Amazon. And this is how we do it. We use very specific tools where we look on the Amazon platform and we start spying on sales. So we start spying on what, like for you, I would just go into the back end and I'd be like, hey dude, let's check out your Amazon cart. What are the things you bought? What are the things your wife's bought? What have you bought for the kids? Oh, this is interesting. You bought a baby so-and-so. Well, let's look at that. Let's spy on the sales. How many sales does it have? How high is the competition? And we use these very specific algorithms that I've built since 2010 to go in there and to find vulnerabilities in the marketplace. I know you wanted to dig into the minutia of this, so we can really get into this. And what we do is we find niches, and it's all about getting into those niches that have vulnerabilities. So maybe somebody has, in the example of a baby carrier, but maybe you can't see that it's got a zippered pocket, and moms like to have their wallet and everything in one place and maybe a thing for their phone or whatever it may be, but they're not showing it. So all we have to do is we don't have to innovate. We don't have to build a baby carrier. We can find that same carrier. And by the way, we've got tons of resources and we teach you how to get it from China or wherever it is that you want to get it made and shipped here. But we find that exact same product. And now all we have to do is show that it's got that zipper. So we tell a better story. Again, we're not innovating on the product. And the fact that we tell that better story, it might just entail us doing a little bit more research than the average company. There's so much shit on Amazon where people just don't give a fuck and they just list it on there and they're just, okay, whatever. But like you and me, we need to know, like, dude, my baby's going to be in that thing. Is that cotton organic? Does it have lead? Is it BPA free? Like there's all these things we want to know. So maybe you just do a little bit more research and you find out, hey, this company actually has a certification and their cotton's actually organic. Well, the other guy's not telling that story. Now I have that knowledge. We always talk about knowledge, courage, action, the 3 pillars to success on Amazon, but the 3 pillars to success anywhere. And by the way, I have a 1-hour course, if it's cool with you. Any of your folks that are listening to this, I want to share that with them. It's normally $200. I'll share that absolutely for free to anybody that's listening to your podcast. So we can include the links below. And, you don't need any money to start doing this stuff, to start an Amazon business. You don't need to buy anybody's course. I'll give you this absolutely for free. And, hopefully it'll empower you guys to be able to start a business.
I know it will me.
Yeah, totally. I'm happy to do that. So what you do is you find these niches, and then we find that product and we tell a better story. Again, we haven't innovated. Now we might be like, hey, you know what? The zipper's shitty on this. All the reviews are saying the zipper's shitty. So we're going to call the manufacturer, and you call the manufacturer's like, yeah, it's 12 cents more for a better zipper. And you're like, no brainer. Let's do that. Why don't you do that? Well, they didn't ask us. Okay, great. Let's do that. And And then we'll show in pictures, we'll show in videos, we'll get it out to all these mommy influencers and have them using it. And we'll create a great brand that people can associate with. We'll offer a lifetime guarantee on it, right? How many people are going to return a baby carrier? It's going to be less than 1%. But you know what? The fact that we're willing to stand behind it and offer a lifetime guarantee is going to make a difference to people who are buying it. And we're going to build that credibility. Maybe we will, and these are all elements of influence, we will influence them through authority. So we will find whoever the mommy doctor is or the mommy influencer and have her be part of our marketing efforts, bring them on board. And this is all part of the building of this business on Amazon that you can build and set and forget. And we hire people. I've got VAs from all over the world, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South and Central America. We just hired a bunch of people in Nicaragua, because of COVID, they closed down all these call centers. And these people are near MBAs, college educated, family people, totally trustworthy, hardworking, and $5 to $10 an hour, you can get these people to work for you. And they'll be the best employees you ever had. Yeah. And super smart, super hardworking, just good people all over the world. And you have them running your business. And while you're sleeping, you're creating predictable recurring revenue month after month. And it's not the only thing that you need to do. I talk to people often about finances and I say, look, it's foundational. Just like in martial arts, if you went to UFC and you just knew punching, you wouldn't do very well. Yeah. So in business too, you got to build that foundation. So you need to have one pillar, which is whatever's bringing in the money, that's paying for the diapers, paying the mortgage, whatever that is, until you're secure. That pillar has to be there. It's a table with 4 legs. The second one is you should be thinking at the very least about something in cash flow positive real estate. We teach this foundational thinking. Right now, the market is crazy. So I wouldn't be buying real estate right now, but I would be looking because it's going to change. The third pillar, having some money that's compounding with interest in the markets, buying whatever that stuff is. And the fourth pillar is an e-commerce business. And the best place to do e-commerce, I believe it, is Amazon. But we teach Amazon, eBay, Etsy, Walmart. The story is the same. You're doing the same thing. You're finding the distribution, then you're spying on what the distribution needs, and then you're just telling a better story. And it's the easiest way to do it. It's the least amount of possible effort. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And that's what we teach at Amazon Mastery. That's been the crux of my work for the last 5 years.
I think it's very solid what you said and what you're saying. And from my vantage point, I especially to go way back, like what you said about, it's not the only way to do business, look for distribution, but it's the path of least resistance. And that's something that is extremely valuable as someone who often chooses the path of most resistance. That's a valuable nugget. And then with what you're saying with your Amazon mastery, it's funny, like I would surmise that you're using the same principles you're talking about now to have come to the spot of, hey, an Amazon mastery course would be valuable to people. So like you're teaching the principles within the principles. You're not just doing that because you want to do it. You're doing it because there's a market of people like me who have 2 books up on Amazon who don't sell, thinking these are great books. Why is nobody buying them?
Yeah. And so we could talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Go for it.
So the first thing you have to realize is Amazon started off as a bookseller. It's a ruse. They were never a bookseller. What Amazon was an experiment in market domination and distribution. And that was just the easiest way Bezos could get into it. Books were easy. Everybody reads or read at that time. And it was an easy way to get into a market where he could break into a niche and dominate. Why am I telling you this? Okay. It's very difficult to make money selling books from the books that you sell anywhere. And Amazon is no different. Now, there's people who've got hacks and they do things where they sell a book here and there, or they get, there's a club where they get somebody to buy 10,000 of their books or whatever. The publishing industry, and a lot of people aren't going to want to hear this, and I'm sure you've probably intuited this over the years, is that it's all pay to play, bud. It's all one huge, okay, I'll tell you this. with the exception of a few players. So you've got the Malcolm Gladwells and the really big names out there, but how many of those are there? Maybe a couple dozen. Outside of those guys, you got to find a way to make money from your books on the back end. And I'd love to take a look at your books. So send me the links and I'd love to take a look at them and I can give you comments. But if you think you're going to write a book and put it on Amazon, make any kind of sizable money, I would tell you, but come take my course. Let me teach you how to make real money on Amazon. I've published 8 books. The only way you're going to make money on books is if you have a back end funnel built into it. Now, we've done book acceleration for multimillionaires. And of course, my services are expensive. I bill out at $1,250 an hour. I charge a $55K retainer. So if you're going to freaking hire me to do your Amazon for you, and by the way, this is not the price for my Amazon mastery course. That will give you the 1-hour course for free. And the actual course we can talk about once you've taken a look at the 1-hour course. But as far as my services goes, when companies bring us products or somebody will bring me a book. So I had a CEO who brought me a book and he's like, look, I want this to be a bestseller. And I said, okay, you realize it's going to cost you at least $55,000 and you're never going to make that back selling those books at the rate. And he said, I know. But he said, if I get one speaking engagement, it's $300,000.
Yeah.
And I said, my man, let's do it. And he did. And we published the book for him and made it an Amazon bestseller. And we had a way to do that. So for you, let's say, for example, I know you're not, you're off the mats at the moment. I hope you get back, by the way. And I'd be honored to learn from you and take one of your classes and train with you if you ever come down to LA or if you ever start doing events again. But I think for you, the way you would make money from your book is to publish the book and use the authority from the book to sell something where you have a higher back end. You will make more money doing that, hands down, 100% of the time. New York Times bestseller, Amazon bestseller, moving hundreds of thousands of books. There's a couple handful of people who do it legitimately. The rest of it is pay for play. These authors are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases, millions of dollars of their own money to get their books out there and to make them bestsellers. And the publishing game is a losing game. Nobody's reading books anymore. I know it sounds crazy, but they're not. Everybody wants that 20-second soundbite on YouTube, TikTok, whatever those things are, Insta. Nobody's reading books. This next generation are not reading books. The book sales have never been worse than they are now. We like to think that people are reading books. So why would you write a book? Either you have a story that you really want told and you don't give a fuck, like me. I've got enough money now. I lead a fairly good life. I say extremely good life. I need to be more grateful, but I've got a beautiful family. We travel the world. I've got hundreds of people working for me on Amazon. We make tons of money. I don't have to worry about that. So why did I write my book? Because I felt like my story needed to be told. Yeah. And in that case, we got a deal. They're going to be shopping it around to studios now. So there will be a film that will be made shortly and we'll put out a release on that. So that's exciting for me, but I have no illusions that it's going to make more in 5 years than one day of what I make on Amazon, one day of what I make introducing a new tea product, a new supplement, we've got a new brain supplement now that we're coming out with. I'll make $2 to $3 million from that supplement, in the next 6 months. There's no way you're going to make that from selling a book. But now you come out with a business book, and I don't know what's the title of your last book.
Becoming the World's Toughest Lifelong Learner.
I love that.
It's essentially a business book for someone looking to get started.
Dude, that's awesome. I totally want to read that. Have you read this?
I have. Yeah, the art. Yep. Yeah, the art of learning is what it's
about. I'm showing him The Art of Learning. Josh Waitskin, who's also a martial artist, jiu-jitsu black belt, and the guy who Searching for Bobby Fischer was based on. His book was pretty good. So I'm super psyched to read your book. Did you do an audiobook on yours as well?
I did, actually. If you go to my website, this is for anyone listening. If you go to my website, I did the audiobook. I knew nothing about like officially putting it on Audible. So I just used how I do my podcast, did it, and then realized like, oh crap, there's specs I got to worry about for Audible. So I just used it as a email opt-in to my website. So if you go to my website and you opt in, you'll get the audiobook for free. And I did amazing. It with I love it. It's funny. I love it. But it doesn't matter if nobody listens to it. But in between each chapters, there's like behind the scenes stuff. So it's pretty cool. I think you would enjoy it.
So let's do this actually. So we have a podcast as well called Hack and Grow Rich. And for all you guys listening, please make sure to sign up and subscribe. Why don't we have you on, Spaniard, on our show, Hack and Grow Rich? And I'd love to give all our listeners and viewers a link to your book as well. I think that's super awesome. I've got a guy for you, by the way. So if you want to reach out to me, I've got a guy who can convert it to Audible format. I think you should sell it on Audible. Totally. Perfect. I got a guy who could do it very inexpensively. Another one of our outsourced geniuses.
I'd be very much interested in that.
Yeah, I'll make that introduction for you. But the move is let's use that book to build the world's toughest lifelong learner course. And then you teach people how to become as successful as you. Maybe what we do is we go out there and target fighters, because fighters need financial intelligence. They need to know how to run the business. Like, most of the guys that I know that are incredible at martial arts are terrible at business. So maybe that's the angle that you come at. Now that book is going to make you more money than you've ever made. Not because you're selling the book and getting a buck, they're like someone throwing you a scrap off the table like Amazon does with the books, but because it builds you as the authority in doing that very niche thing.
Yep.
And that's the type of thinking that we teach.
It is. And I as you were saying that, you're spitballing ideas, but even that spitballed idea, I'm thinking, hey, yeah, that is pretty good. And like that's valuable information. And it's so good for me. And this is part of the idea of World's Toughest Lifelong Learner, to be able to have this podcast where I get to talk to people like you, for you to shed light on where I'm at and the things that I can do and perhaps will do to grow my business. So it's just like a kind of this cyclical process, but I love it, man. I think it's really important because, I talk about it pretty openly on my podcast and what I do, but it's really hard to grow a business, like being good at something and then being good at the business of something. I forget which book I read that in, but it is a very real thing. And, I was just telling Dredd, my partner, and all of this, and, that it's very hard to grow the podcast. It's very hard to sell books. I know what excellence is. I know what a good book is. I read hundreds of them. I know my products are that, but what you're saying, like the distribution, getting it to the people, I mean, it's a crutch. It's a hindrance. It's an obstacle that needs to be overcome. So it's, what you're doing is very helpful.
Yeah. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate that.
Well, we're coming up on, I think, over an hour at this point, but, share whatever information you want now in terms of the course, in terms of Amazon Mastery, your book, and then whatever you don't mention, you can send me and I'll follow up with the outro there.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I'll definitely share all my information with you. And I think, my publicist has sent that to you as well, and I'll share it with you as well. So guys, if you want to reach me, I'm happy to have a conversation or a call with anybody who thinks that they would like to have another source of recurring revenue. If that's something you think might be right for you, I'll have a call with you free of charge. All you got to do is say you heard me on the Spaniard. You could reach me on my website, Cheyene.com, and I'm going to spell it out for you guys that are just listening. That's going to be SHAAHINCHEYENE.com. And please make sure that you join our Hack and Grow Rich podcast. So just go wherever you find podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere where podcasts are found. Make sure to subscribe to Hack and Grow Rich. If you're interested in the book Billion, it'll be out probably by the time you're listening to this in August. You can get that on Amazon. Billion, How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult. The audiobook will be out too. And our Amazon course is FBAsellercourse.com, or just go to ShaahinCheyenne.com and click on Amazon course. And I will share that with you here on the show notes here.
Perfect.
And we will go from there. Dude, super honored to be on, and really impressed with all that you've done. It sounds like you're doing amazing work to bring excellence into the world, and I'm honored to be a part of your show.
I appreciate it, man. This was a good connection and extremely valuable, and I definitely will for sure take the hour course, and absolutely with Dred and I look into Amazon Mastery. So appreciate your time here, man, and best of luck with everything moving forward.
Amazing.